Alright, I want to show a little demo of how Tightener allows out-of-band communication between InDesign Server and controlling applications on different platforms. So I have here three computers, two of them are virtual machines. I have a Mac, I have a Windows machine, and I have a Linux machine. On the Linux machine I only have Tightener installed. On the Windows machine I have InDesign Server installed and Tightener. And on the Mac I have InDesign Server installed and Tightener. So I'll go through the motions of actually setting up InDesign Server and then communicating between the different computers with while the server is running, while the server is actually rendering a job. So the first thing is to clear Tightener and reset it to factory conditions. So that's easy. You do copy config, and that essentially copies a new config on top of the old one. So make sure that all settings are gone and it's clear. It's as if it was just installed. Second step is I'm going to edit that config. Oops. And I'm going to configure it so that it uses InDesign Server rather than the desktop version of InDesign. And I'm also going to configure it that it's network enabled, so we can actually interact between multiple platforms. So to configure it for InDesign Server, I here need to go onto this line, which says the InDesign coordinator suffix needs to be the server suffix, which makes this Tightener target InDesign Server on this computer. And the second thing I'm going to change is that it needs to use the network enabled central coordinator rather than the default local only coordinator. So now I have a setup of Tightener that can interact with other computers, and it also has InDesign Server set up as its main InDesign. So the word InDesign here, if I use the word InDesign on the various command line utilities, they will target the InDesign Server. Okay, so I can close this config, and now I can install my plugin. ID plugin install. So ID plugin install will look at the config file and determine where it needs to install a plugin. So it needs my password on a Mac, and it has installed a plugin in Adobe InDesign Server. So we have now a setup that's ready to go. I can now launch InDesign Server. So ID launch again launches whatever is configured as the main InDesign. In this case it's the server. If I had InDesign Desktop configured, then ID launch would just launch InDesign Desktop. But in this case we have launched the InDesign Server. And now I can already start interacting with InDesign Server on this particular computer. So what I'll do is I'll go through a few simple things. I'll go to my samples folder, but I can I can interact with ExtendScript or Tickle. So when Tightener is installed in that target program, there are actually multiple language centers. So there's a Tickle, TQL language center. There's also ExtendScript, so we can talk to either. There's also UXP script, so we can talk to any of those. And I have different command line utilities to talk with a different type of language. So I'll use the RRE, which is Run Remote ExtendScript. And I'll use the REPL, which is the Run Eval Print Loop. And I'll target InDesign. And the word InDesign means InDesign Server on this computer, because that's what we configured in the config. Okay, so now I can say add.name, for example, and of course we're talking to Adobe InDesign Server, so this is kind of a terminal window into the running InDesign Server. I can also say, for example, $.os, and that tells me this is a Macintosh. I can also do something like alert Mac IDS, so just a standard ExtendScript command on the server. The alert translates into a console window entry. See, and of course the server is running and it has output that string. So I can talk to ExtendScript. I can also talk to the tickle. So I'll do a tickle REPL. So run remote tickle, and I target InDesign again, and I can do, for example, sysinfo coordinator name, and that's the long coordinator name for that InDesign server. I can also say sysinfo platform. So this is the equivalent of that $.os, and that's a Mac. So this is all local. We've been talking to a local copy of InDesign Server. While I'm at it, I'm also going to launch the gateway just to make sure it is running. And I verify what is running. Yes, so the gateway is running and the InDesign Server is running. Okay, so now I'll switch to the PC and do the same configuration here. So I'll do copy config to reset everything to factory conditions. I do edit config. I'm configuring InDesign Server. Already a bit far. Yeah. InDesign Server suffix. And then I'm also going to configure the network version. Save. Then install the plugin. Yes, sorry, I have a noisy keyboard. I love noisy keyboards. And then I'm going to verify that I launched the proper InDesign Server. There it is. That's InDesign Server. So something is weird with InDesign Server in that when it says scanning for plugins, or sometimes it gives the number of plugins and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it says like 117 plugins and sometimes it doesn't. And it seems completely random. So on startup, sometimes it will report the number of plugins. No idea why. Why would it do that? No idea. Okay, InDesign Server is running, so I'll open another command line window. Open. Yeah, I'm running as administrator, so that makes things easy. So I can do the same thing. I can do run remote ExtendScript, do run loop InDesign. And I can now say app.name, and that is Adobe InDesign Server, and I can say $.os, that's Windows, and I can say alert win IDS or something, and there it is in the console. So we're talking to this InDesign server that's currently active. I can do quit. I can do the same thing with RRT, so I could do REPL RRT. I'm not going to do that, so now I'm going to switch to the Linux machine. Okay, and same thing, so I'll first reset everything to clean config, edit the config, and this one I'm going to configure a little bit different. So I'm going to add a few entries here. I'm going to make an IDS Mac equals DAGH column. So, and the machine that runs the Mac InDesign server is Holly. And on that machine I want to talk to InDesign. And IDS win. That is actually on Freddy. So I have Holly as a Mac and Freddy is a Windows machine. Both have InDesign server. And on both machines the word InDesign refers to the installed InDesign server. So it's not because it says InDesign here. So essentially what this says, I'm going to talk to whatever InDesign is installed on Holly. I'm going to talk to whatever InDesign is installed on Freddy. And in both cases that is an InDesign server. Okay, so then I also need to configure the network gateway. So I don't need to reconfigure the InDesign because there is no InDesign on this computer. It's a Linux machine, so it only has Tightener. So but I save my config. So for just check that nothing is running. So I can launch my gateway, make sure it is running. Yeah, the gateway is running. I forgot to launch it on Windows, so I'll do the same thing. So the gateway should be running on Windows now. So let's open another command line window and say what is running. Say Tightener gateway is running, InDesign Server is running, and we're all good. So now I can actually start talking to those InDesigns from the Linux machine. So I can do run remote REPL IDS Mac, and if I do app.name Adobe InDesign Server, what platform are you on, dear server? That server is on a Mac. So I'll open up a new command line window, and in this case I'll do an RRE REPL IDS win, and I'll say app.name, who are you? I'm a server. What's your operating system? It's a server on Windows. So now I have two read evaluate print loops open, and each one refers to an InDesign server on a different platform. Okay, let's quit those for a sec. Quit. So now I'm going to make those servers work a bit. So here I have a set of sample scripts, and I'll do run remote ExtendScript InDesign do something. I'll show you what do something does. Wait, I'll just do subtle do something JSX. So it's a dummy script that just creates a document, puts in a text frame, puts in some text, saves it, closes it, and then deletes it. So it's an eternal loop that counts to 10,000 documents, and it will just create documents and delete them, create document and delete them. And it does very little, but it just like it's to keep the server busy. So a loop that takes a long time to complete. So if I do RRE InDesign do something, so this is a simple way I can make that server run a script. And note that this server is not running SOAP or anything. There is no SOAP, there is no ports, so the InDesign server itself has no ports open. The only thing that's interacting with the outside world is Tightener. So RRE InDesign. And there it starts. So it's essentially it's rendering documents, and it will go on for 10,000 documents. I'll do the same on Windows. And there. So I have the same script here. So I do run remote ExtendScript InDesign do something. So on this computer, the word InDesign means the InDesign server. So once I run that, I start that script, and it's starting to render documents. So, and you'll see documents flicker on the desktop occasionally as it saves and deletes them. So these servers are now hard at work. So now I'm going to see if I can still interact with them from the Linux machine. So in actuality, I can still even interact with ExtendScript. But that's kind of a little bit unclean, because you're running an ExtendScript while another ExtendScript is running. So it's kind of you're interjecting some ExtendScript statement, so you don't really know what the state is of that server. So there's ways to do it sensibly, but the easiest is to use Tcl. So Tcl is the language that is used for the automation on the Tightener bus. So, and that's one of its main purposes is actually to allow us to do stuff while to do with automation, not to do with the actual rendering. The actual rendering is done in ExtendScript. So, but I can do RRT REPL IDS Mac. So, and this thing should now still be active. So I should still be able to do say sysinfo coordinator name. So the only thing is that it will be a bit slower, so I still need to tweak my idle time and so on. So everything is cooperative. Yeah, see, that's what I mean. Everything is cooperatively multitasking, so it the timeouts trigger. Oh, CD trigger quite quickly. CD samples. I'll do it differently. So CD monitor. Okay, so I have so like there's a report status script, and I'll adjust the script slightly to actually talk to the InDesign on Mac and tell us what the status is. So what I do is RRT run remote tickle script. I want to talk to IDS Mac, and I want to run the report status.tickle script. See, this Mac is still hard at work, and I'm going to wait up to 120 seconds for a result. And I'm going to do, yeah, the result is already there. See, like I can see there is an engine RRE running, so if I shorten that a bit, let's wait for 10 seconds. 10,000, and then pipe it through JSON PP, and I'll do the same here. RRT IDS win report status tickle 10,000 JSON. Did I do wrong? Oh, might be a timeout. Oh, I only did 1,000 seconds, that's why. 10,000 seconds. Yeah, there it is. Do it again. 10,000. So I may need to do that again. Oh, here, of course, it waits the full 2 minutes before the actual JSON renderer kicks in, so I'll shorten that to 10 seconds. Any which way, you can see that it has an active ExtendScript engine, so it has both status info on ExtendScript and UXP script, and it tells me which one is active. So right now there's no UXP script engines active, and there is so timeout. So but you see these are still processing. The Windows is still processing, the Mac is still processing, and yet I can still interact with them in Tickle. So one other thing that I can do is I can stop the script. So I can say rr run remote tickle IDS win stop script tickle. So and that script should now have, see, like here my do something came out of it and it stopped rendering. So 251. So and I can actually interact with this thing. So this thing is now stopped. It's a clean stop. It didn't really abort. It just essentially stopped running ExtendScript. So you see this one is still ticking away. So I'll stop the Mac one. And RRT IDS Mac stop script tickle. And also like this one came out of it and it stopped rendering here, so the script has stopped. So this is quite exciting. So I need to still do a bit of work on how often I service those background tasks, because the main rendering task is currently taking all the CPU cycles, and I don't really leave a lot of CPU cycles for that background tickle execution. But that's something I can tweak, so and I can make it more responsive. So I'll probably change it so that when tickle stuff interaction is starting to happen, it will temporarily take away some performance from the main rendering script and actually use it to execute the tickle script, meaning also that those tickle scripts should be short and quick. So that's about it. So you can also like do things like, for example, actually monitor the running script, but then the script needs to be written properly. So for example, the script can report some information in a global variable, and then it's possible to run another ExtendScript that actually extracts those globals and checks, for example, the count, for example, or a progress number. So you could actually report progress on your server side on a Linux machine. So just wanted to share this to show that Tcl can actually now interact with the running InDesign server while it's active. So still some work to do on the timings and the timeouts, but proof of concept works, so I'm pretty sure this will work out. Thank you.